Hi, this is Greg Regan, President of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. We're here with the next installment of our BIL Delivers video series, where we're talking about the benefits of the infrastructure law that is going to deliver for working people and for people throughout the country. Today, I'm joined by Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska's 2nd District. Congressman, how are you?
Very good, Greg, and thanks for having me on today.
Sure. Well, Congressman, your leadership on this issue has been really critical and really important. In the Senate, when it passed in the Senate, we had quite a few Republicans support the bill. You were one of a smaller number in the House who ultimately supported this infrastructure law. Why don't you tell me a little bit about why you supported this bill and what you think it can deliver for Nebraska?
Well, big picture, infrastructure is very important to our country. A strong infrastructure, a hard infrastructure, helps us compete with commerce and trade. So you need a great interstate system, road system, bridges. You got to have great ports. Our locks are very important when it comes to exporting grain, as an example. So a hard infrastructure, if you want to compete with trade and commerce, you got to have a great infrastructure system. But beyond that, I think it's also important for national security reasons as well. If you want to move things from East Coast to West Coast and have a logistics system that works, you need infrastructure. Thirdly, I think it's very important for public safety. When it comes to airport safety, rail safety, road safety, port safety, you need to have an updated, modern system. So that's just big picture. And here's another big picture thought. America spends about 2% of its GDP on hard infrastructure. Canada does 4%. Europe does 5%. China is doing 9%. We are falling behind. And so to me, it was a national interest to do this infrastructure bill because we cannot afford to have a third-rate logistics system in our country. So that's sort of the big picture things. Maybe another area just to throw out there, I believe this should be a Republican issue. Abraham Lincoln was one of the biggest proponents for the Transcontinental Railroad. He was a big proponent for waterways, deepening, the rivers and locks. Dwight Eisenhower was a big supporter of the interstate system. I align myself with their thoughts on infrastructure, that this is a national thing, and it's about national strength. So I think their writings on this is where I align myself with. Now for Nebraska, it's very important. We have 1,300 bridges that need to be replaced. And we have about $225 million in this bill that's going to Nebraska to do just that. We're getting about $2.2 billion for work on our roads and highways. We're getting money for our airports, of which Eppley Airfield is getting ready to do about an $800 million upgrade to their airfield. And almost all this money is coming from the hard infrastructure bill. We're gonna have one of the best airports in the country by the time we're done. And the infrastructure bill is gonna make that possible. We also have not the best internet system or broadband system in Nebraska. It's hit and miss. And we're going to get about $100 million to work on that. And finally, we have a lot of water infrastructure that needs to be worked on in Nebraska. And we're getting over $230 million to get rid of some of the lead pipes and to replace a lot of the pipings or put new pipes in where Nebraska is growing. I live in Sarpy County. It's the fastest growing county of 93 counties in Nebraska. And half of the county, it does not have water infrastructure, and yet it's the fastest growing county. So we're putting in new water systems throughout this county now, and the hard infrastructure bill is making that possible.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on the competitiveness side of this. I mean, I think if you look at what happened in our country over the last couple of years, where we saw a real disruption to our freight transportation system. We saw it at the ports, we saw it in the railroads and the trucking industry. And there's a lot of money in this bill that will go towards addressing those specific backlogs in our freight system, which actually allows us, it's not just about making sure that people working in these systems are able to be competitive and succeed, but it helps us deliver goods overseas and vice versa to bring stuff in. So I know that there's a very large agricultural community in Nebraska. How do you think this will deliver for the ag communities that you represent?
Well, we're an export state. We're like #1 exporter for beef. I think we're #3 for corn, #5 for pork, 6 for soybeans. So when you put it all together, We are clearly an export state in our agriculture area. Now, I gotta tell you that the locks on the Mississippi and Ohio maybe does not directly impact the commodities coming out of Nebraska, but I look at the system as a whole and it's needed. We have 80 to 90-year-old locks on the Mississippi and Ohio. Brazil's building new locks on the Amazon to move their grain, and those locks are 3 times bigger. So, Greg, I would submit to you, if we can grow corn and soybeans at a price that nobody can beat, but you can't ship them as affordable as another country, you lose that competitive advantage. So we need locks. And for Nebraska, it may not be the locks because we're to the west of the Missouri River,
Right.
But we still need the railroads to ship our grain and the ports to move those grain out. And our ports are also not as modern as what China is building. So some of these infrastructure to move our grain and beef and pork may not be right in Nebraska. It may be on the coasts, it may be in the railroads getting there, but it still has a tremendous impact to moving our exports out competitively and at a price that allows us to compete with the world.
Well, you're right, because everything that, the performance of any part of our transportation system relies on the performances of the rest of them as well. We're not going to have an efficient supply chain if our trucking industry is not performing well. Same way if the ports aren't performing well, or if the trucking industry isn't working very well, or the warehousing isn't working well. So when you look at a massive countrywide investment, one-time investment to sort of bring our systems more competitive and up to the standards that the rest of the world sets themselves, I think it sets us up for a future. One other thing, and Congressman, you've been a very strong supporter of working people and organized labor during your time in Congress. I know that a lot of this money is going to go in towards creating really good union jobs in states and communities all throughout this country. What impact do you expect to see in terms of job creation and economic activity as this money starts to flow out into the communities like yours?
I can tell right now our pipe fitters are very excited about a lot of the infrastructure that will be built. When you talk to our carpenters, they feel the same way. And obviously you with the transportation, it's important for our truckers, our airline folks, our railroad community, because this affects all of those transportation systems. But one of the areas that I think we need to work on in conjunction with the hard infrastructure bill is we got to keep working on our trades and the training that we're doing in our high schools and helping provide a better pathway for folks in junior high and high school to realize that this is a great career, a high paying career with health insurance and benefits for retirement. But a lot of our young folks don't hear that today. They hear they got to go to school and or 4-year school and do this, but the trades offers a high-paying alternative, and you could do this without accumulating any college debt. And while you're going through training, you're getting your health insurance paid for, and you're working for a full career and a retirement someday. And so I feel like this is part of the equation that we didn't address necessarily in the infrastructure bill, but I think it's something that we gotta. This is like round 2. We're gonna have to work on building that workforce and can get this done.
You're right. And what's really great, the apprenticeship model that we see in the building trades is one that's been a huge success, and one that we're starting to see replicated in other parts of our economy as well. Amtrak, for example, just got a grant to start their own apprenticeship program, where again, you're teaching people a skilled craft that they can do for the rest of their lives and earn a good living on it and retire with dignity. So I think that there's a lot of benefits that we're going to see from this. And to your point about getting it right, we now have to implement this thing. We've got there's going to be a lot of money starting to flow out now. There's going to be a lot of different opportunities for people and states and local governments to apply for funds. And that's where your job in Congress is going to be really critical towards providing that appropriate oversight and making sure that, that we are going to make sure this money flows out in the way that Congress intended. And as one of the champions of this bill, your voice is going to matter quite a bit there.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of this money will go down to the state level, will be parceled out the way the current highway bill does. And so we need to keep our eyes on that to ensure it's going to where it's needed. And but it's largely a state decision, a lot of that. And then we're going to be a lot of grant money as well, so as a separate source of revenue. And so my goal is to make sure it's going to hard infrastructure, not somebody's pet project that is not hard infrastructure related. And but our country needs it. We're spending less than half of what our competitors are doing per GDP on our infrastructure, and it's starting to show.
Yeah. Well, is there anything, I'm proud enough to represent 37 unions and workers in just about every sector of our transportation in this country. Anything that our members should know that you're looking out for, and anything that your constituents should know that we haven't already touched on?
Well, there was a lot of false information about this bill. This was truly one of the biggest accomplishments in this administration, but we shouldn't have seen it as a Democrat victory or Republican victory. And unfortunately, in the circles I was in, it was trying to be painted as that. This was an American victory. It was about American infrastructure, American trade, American public safety, American national security, American competitiveness. And it should have been framed in that way. And by the way, the previous president had a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. And a lot of folks were concerned about the spending part of it. This bill was actually a little bit smaller than what was proposed by President Trump. But I felt like if you look at this bill, would I have written it exactly the same way? No, I wouldn't have. But I thought 95 to 98% of this bill was spot on. And it was fulfilling a big need in our country. And by the way, in our district, it polls at around 70%. And so it was, from a constituent perspective, not a hard decision to make. And most of the industries here saw the need for what this bill was going to provide. When you have folks who are making combines in our district saying, Don, we need this hard infrastructure bill because in their case, they want the rural broadband because the combines now do all this IP work on the combine. And I can just go case by case, different industries saying this bill fills a critical need and it will be good for agriculture. It's going to be good for trucking. It's going to be good for you name it. So in the end, this was an American victory, this bill, and it was definitely bipartisan when it started. Yep. I mean, I was in the beginning of this bill where it was half Republican, half Democrat. Unfortunately, it became more partisan towards the end, but I don't think that was right. It did not need to go down that path.
Well, it was a pleasure working with you throughout this process. I look forward to being there with you as we start to see these projects delivered and we start seeing the benefits roll out. And it's going to be a joy to see, as you said, an American victory and one that's better for our country overall. So thank you for joining me today.
Seeing these upgrades to Eppley Airport in Omaha, you'll have to come down and be part of the ribbon cuttings.
That sounds great. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, sir.
All right.